Hello everyone, today we're going to read a story titled Carle, Mr. Seahorse. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist, this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse. And she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpet fish hidden in a patch of reeds. "Can you see a group of trumpet fish?" And there's it. And this weed is a orange and green color, and it's orange and green color. This is hard to find it. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted." "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest and right away." Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs in it. "Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch. Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. It is hard to find it, but when you fill up the page, you can find it really easily. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know," said Mr. Horse. Mr. Tilapia had laid her eggs. "Now you're taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. I think here's a fish here, and there's two of them. As Mr. Horse drifted gently through the sea. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Cortus?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtos. Mrs. Curtos had laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I am taking a good care of them until they hatch. You're doing a good job, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. And here's I can see it here because it's big. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Mrs. Pipe it couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. Mrs. Pipe has laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch. You should feel proud of yourself, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Bullhead? asked Mr. Seahorse. Tip-top, replied Mr. Bullhead. Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs. The eggs hatched. Now I'm babysitting. You are doing a great job, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. The time had come for the seahorse babies to born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that, and at last the babies tumbled out of Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to get back into a pouch. Oh no, said Mr. Seahorse. I do love you, but now you're ready to be on your own. And there's a little baby seahorse here. The end. And first is a seahorse, and Mrs. Seahorse laid eggs on his pouch, and Mr. Stickleback too. Mrs. Stickleback laid the eggs at Mr. Stickleback. And Mrs. Tilapia had laid her eggs on Mr. Tilapia's mouse. And Mrs. Cartus laid the egg on Mr. Cartus' head. And Mrs. Pipe laid the eggs on and Mr. Pipe's belly. And finally, Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs and attached. So Mr. Bullhead is babysitting, and finally, Mr. Seahorse has a baby too. Thank you for reading.